of the one holy and undivided Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be back with you as your guest preacher and celebrant. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Janice Shalron. I'm a retired priest from Rock Hill, South Carolina, where I live with my husband Pierre and a Portuguese water dog puppy named Lorca Blue. He's a marvel and a menace. These are some of the things that most people know about me, but I'm also someone that throughout my life has had an affinity, a connection, if you will, with the number 3. That's right, the number 3. What do I mean? Well, let me give you a couple of examples. I was the third of 4 daughters growing up. I attended 3 universities as an undergraduate: Emory University, the University of Virginia, and UNC in Chapel Hill. Go Tar Heels. I married on June 3rd. I have 3 adult children and 3 grandgirls, plus 1 super grand boy. And when the time came for me to be ordained, wait for it, I was ordained on Trinity Sunday, a feast day that originated in the Middle Ages, and as I said before, I'm celebrating 32 years of ordained ministry. And even though I've had this quirky relationship with the number 3, of the many blessings I received at my ordination, I did not receive the blessing of being able to explain the Holy Trinity, the 3 in 1, the Godhead of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And every Sunday, you and I worship the triune God and confess our belief in the Holy Spirit, the Lord, the giver of life, who proceeds from the Father and the Son. With the Father and Son, he is worshiped and glorified. You might recognize that from our Nicene Creed. The doctrine of the Trinity is central to our creeds, and it's actually central to our faith. But the Trinity, the union of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, remains for the most part a mystery, unknowable, not easily explained. But there are certain stories of intrepid theologians and clergy who have tried to do that, like St. Patrick in Ireland. In his youth, he'd been enslaved in Ireland. He escaped, but he returned there after receiving a call from God to bring the gospel to the Irish people. The tradition goes that the Irish were bewildered by the whole idea of a trinity. Is that like 3 gods or something? So Patrick plucked a shamrock, of course, and used it as an example because the 3 leaves of the shamrock grow out of 1 stem. Now, while this saint had the power to cast out all the snakes in Ireland, he did not have the power to explain the Trinity. And the Irish, as he reported, remained confused. And there's the story of St. Thomas Aquinas. He'd written reams and reams about the Father, preached about the presence of Christ in the Eucharist, and the refreshment of the world by the activity of the Holy Spirit. But when he was granted a vision of the Trinity, he literally stopped writing. The glory of that moment, he said, cannot be written of or spoken of. So for the rest of his life, St. Thomas remained silent about the Trinity. And then there's the story of John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, who was and remained an Anglican priest until the day he died. He decided to preach on the Trinity on one of his preaching missions and botched it up entirely. All I managed to do, he's reported to have said in his diary, is to make the Trinity more confusing, and I know I ended up preaching some kind of heresy. Now, while he was brooding over his failure that night in the home of one of his parishioners, he happened to notice that there were 3 candles burning, but only one light. He said, "It's a simple matter to speak of 3 candles, but the light I could describe for eternity." I'm telling these stories about past attempts to penetrate the mystery of the Holy Trinity, and even if they are incomplete, they can engage us to ponder this central part of our faith. And particularly today, where we celebrate the 3 in 1 and 1 in 3, I think it's worthwhile just to take some time and to think about the Trinity. I found long ago one story that I'm going to retell that helped me and maybe will help you cut through some of that, mysticism around the Godhead. And the story goes like this. A number of years ago, a bishop decided to visit all of his parishes, so he hired a boat and some hardy sailors, and they set out to visit various islands that hadn't received attention from the bishop before. Wherever he went, the bishop was welcomed and greeted with great hospitality and thanksgivings for making the journey to these island villages. Now, the bishop was by nature a humble man, but he greatly enjoyed the praise and adulation that everyone was heaping on him. So on his last day on the farthest island, he thought, he overheard sailors on his ship mentioning a very small island just out of sight where there were 3 hermits living who prayed for their own and the world's redemption. So the bishop said, "These hermits are part of my flock. I must make an effort to visit them." So the bishop's vessel set sail, and soon they were within sight of this very, very small island, and the bishop could see 3 little huts and 3 figures standing on the beach. While being rowed ashore, he could see that one of the hermits had a long beard down to his knees. The middle one was extremely tall and had sort of a rough cloak over his shoulders. And the 3rd hermit was the smallest, and he was constantly moving. The bishop reached the shore, disembarked, and the 3 hermits held hands and knelt before him. And the bishop condescended to let each hermit kiss his ring. And then he asked what prayers they offered for their own and for the world's redemption. The hermits joined hands and recited, "God, you are 3, we are 3, have mercy upon us." The bishop smiled and said, "Their prayer was not what you really prayed to God. You offer to God the prayer his son Jesus gave to the church." And so the bishop began to instruct them on saying the Lord's Prayer, "Our Father, who art in heaven." Now, the hermit with the long beard could recite the opening of the prayer, and then he stopped and got mixed up. The middle, tall hermit got through most of the prayer, but then he would see a bird or a cloud and get distracted and want to talk about creation. And the smallest of the hermits never got beyond the first words, "Our Father," because he kept moving and moving around. But the bishop patiently persisted. And by the evening, all 3 of the hermits knew the Lord's Prayer, so that when the bishop departed back to his vessels, the 3 hermits held hands and bowed down to him. And after being rowed out to the ship, the bishop looked back and saw the 3 still holding hands, and he raised his own hand and made the sign of the cross. Evening was descending, and the ship caught a stiff breeze and began to move away quickly from the small island of the hermits, and the bishop was thinking to himself, "They seem to really appreciate my instruction. I'm glad I could teach them another prayer besides that very simple, silly one that they had. I believe my time was well spent." And the bishop continued to congratulate himself until he became distracted by a light dancing on the waves. He and several of the sailors gathered on the deck to look at the light that, instead of getting smaller, seemed to be growing in size and in brilliance. Everyone was wondering where had the light come from? What caused this radiance? And then the light seemed to almost split, and inside the light was a form. And that form remained in that light, but now it seemed to be taking on three forms that touched, never separated. And then the bishop and the sailors cried out, "There are the three hermits within that light. And they are gliding over the waves and moving so quickly over the water that they're going to reach our ship soon." And the light was so strong that everyone on the ship felt like it was midday. And the hermits, when they arrived, were carried over the side of the ship and onto the deck. The three, still holding hands, knelt before the bishop and said, "Dear Bishop, could you teach us that other prayer? We've lost the middle of it and some of the ending, and we don't think we got it started correctly." Instead of instructing them, the bishop raised the hermits up and then knelt before them. The bishop then proceeded to kiss their feet, and looking up into their faces, he asked in a very quiet voice, "Please teach me your prayer." So the hermits recited their prayer, "God, you are three, and we are three. Have mercy upon us." And the bishop was joined in the saying of the prayer by the sailors, all of whom were kneeling on the deck. "You are three, and we are three. Have mercy upon us." The hermits then turned and began to climb over the handrails of the deck. Once they were out on the water, gliding away, they looked back once and then began their swift journey over the waves back to their island. The bishop then rose to his feet and watched them, and the light. He watched the light that was shining around them, illuminating each hermit, and that light was getting dimmer and dimmer until the edges of that intense light began to blur and become faint. But that light kept shining until daybreak on the spot where the hermits were lost from sight. And when the sun rose in the east, the bishop thought to himself he would always remember the hermits. He would always remember that light. And he would offer perpetual thanks to the one holy and undivided Trinity, who offer lessons in humility, and above all, to lessons